Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much to all of you who are helping out with Maryland History Day feedback this year. This is the Maryland History Day electronic review training session. My name is Leah Atnett, and I am the outreach coordinator for Maryland History Day, which usually means I'm in the classroom with students, making sure they have the resources they need to complete a project. And I also do workshops for teachers. Also here with me tonight is Grace Woodward, who is the outreach assistant for History Day. So if you have any questions throughout this and I don't see you in the chat, Grace will be there in the chat to help you out. Electronic review is a little bit different from being a judge at a state contest because we don't ask you to consult with other judges or rank students. You don't need to complete a formal judging rubric sheet. You will just be giving constructive feedback to help these students do the best that they can at the state contest. If you have judged or reviewed in the past, much of this training will be familiar to you. Hopefully it'll just be like a refresher. If you are new, it might seem like a lot to take in, but I will make sure that you have both this recording and this PowerPoint so you can refer back to it. And I'll also try to point out some changes that were made this year to the rules and to the judging criteria, as well as the ways that some of the formats will look different this year for the virtual contest. Okay, so let's move forward. All right, welcome again. Maryland Humanities thanks you for supporting History Day, and these students will also be thanking you. Your support will be so valuable for them, especially in this weird school year where they're getting a lot less time with their teachers. All right, your mission, should you choose to accept it. Apologies to Tom Cruise. First and foremost, to foster students' love of history. So we really want students to come away from this with the memory of History Day being a great and positive experience and something that they can feel really proud of. Not all of these students will go on to become historians, but this experience might help them become lifelong learners of history. So we really want to keep that up. We want to keep it positive. Next, it strengthens students' researching skills. This includes writing a thesis, using evidence to back up their arguments, taking and applying feedback, citing their work. These are all things that are going to help them become better high school students and eventually better college students. The next one is the most concrete one. The thing that you're doing here is providing constructive feedback for all. And then finally, you're helping these students make their projects more competitive for the next level of the contest. And that's something that, you know, we can all take pride in, seeing our Maryland students do well at the national contest and move forward. A little bit of background, if you are new to this, this is your first year, just a little bit about what National History Day is, or Maryland History Day. So it is a history research project that students do over the course of several months on a topic of their choice. After they do their research, they will present their findings in one of 5 creative categories: the paper, website, performance, documentary, or exhibit. They can work either individually or in groups of up to 5, except for the paper category, which is always done individually. And there are 2 divisions. There's a junior division for middle school students and a senior division for high school students. We mostly see middle school students. We see many more middle school students than high school students doing this project. When you get a project, you won't necessarily know the exact grade that a student is in. You will just know if they're junior or senior. A little bit about the contest progression. So at the school level, we see, on a normal school year, we see sometimes up to 27,000 students across the state of Maryland completing a History Day project. From each school, a few students will move on to their district contest, which is usually counties and then Baltimore City. A few students from each district will move on to the state contest. And then about 60 students from the state of Maryland each year will move on to National History Day, and they'll have the chance to compete with students from all over the country, as well as US territories and students on US military bases elsewhere in the world, which is really exciting. So it's good to note that most students start this project out as a required project for their social studies classroom, and they will have guidance from their teachers up until at least the school contest. And again, as you know, this has been a crazy and stressful year for students and teachers alike. And I've heard from many that teachers were not able to give the same level of hands-on support that they would in a normal year, which is understandable. And this may or may not be reflected in the projects we see. But either way, you know, this is why it's so important that you guys have volunteered and that you're lending this extra hand and really helping the teachers out. And also the fact that these students were able to complete an intensive project like this is really impressive. So that's always good. So the projects that you will be seeing in this round will be those that are between the district and the state level. Those that were chosen to advance from districts to states, but they're trying to pull together the loose ends of their projects before they turn it into that contest. So the next important thing to know about History Day is that every year there is an annual theme. This year, the theme was communication and history, the key to understanding. And every year the theme is something that's really broad that can be interpreted in many different ways. So as I've listed here, communication can be technological, it can be interpersonal, it can be political, and many more things. And it's up to the students to figure out how they're going to work in the communication angle. But the connection to the theme must be clear and it must be explicit throughout the project, starting in the thesis statement and working its way throughout. Students must explain the topic's relationship to the theme and its significance in history. So we really stress that impacts are an important part of this project. Again, topics are the student's choice. They can be local history, national history, world history, anything that they like. And we find that that's really important for keeping motivation, keeping that passion in there to keep the students going. And I have that link in here again for the theme intro video, just to give you an idea of some of the possible topics that students might be focusing on this year. Okay, so in addition to that main project that you'll be getting, there will also be this paperwork packet that will come along with it. So just so you know what to expect, what you're going to be looking at, there will be a title page, process paper, and annotated bibliography. The title page is just going to have the basic identifying info that we need for that project and also applicable word counts. And it's a little bit different for each project category. So if you suspect that something is missing from a title page, you might want to check that out in the rule book. Nothing on the title page is counted toward any word limit. And it also shouldn't include any school name, city, or county, just to eliminate any possible judge bias, either positive or negative, at the contest. Okay. The process paper. So the process paper has a 500-word maximum. There are 5 questions that they will answer through this process paper. You can find them in the rule book, but they cover things like how the student chose the topic, how they conducted their research, and the relationship to the theme. Their central argument or their thesis statement should also be included in the process paper, which is, I believe, a new criteria this year. The process paper is the part of it that can and should be in the first person. Most of the project will likely be third person, but this one is really where they talk about the process that they went through. And it's your chance to see how deeply the student engaged in their research. How much did they really dig? How invested were they in their topic, etc. And then finally, for the annotated bibliography, this is not counted toward any word limit. They should have primary and secondary sources separated out, and annotations should be no more than 2 to 3 sentences. They should give a short summary of the source and explain how they used it in their project, and make sure the style is consistent in either Chicago or MLA. The bibliography is a really great place to look to give feedback, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And now I'm going to get into the different project categories and the rules for each. This is going to be a lot of info. I'm not going to read everything off each slide, but again, you can come back to these, and most of it will be stuff from the rule books. I'll just try to pull out some of the most important things that you might not get otherwise. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about are the exhibits. And I'm going to go sort of out of order. I apologize for this. I don't know if you can see it because my little Zoom thumbnail images are covering it up, but there's a red star next to one of the criteria on the side. So the red stars that I have on here are indicating either a new rule or a rule that has been clarified since last year. So the red star I have here is indicating that any media clips used in an exhibit should total no more than 2 minutes. Last year it was 3 minutes, so that's been changed. This year I'm guessing that exhibits will be more pared down because, you know, things are looking different this year, but just be ready for it. You know, if students do include media clips, they should adhere to that new rule. I want to point out for anyone who's doing this for the first time, the word limit for the exhibit is 500 words. That is the shortest word limit of any History Day project. For word limits in general, students know that they exist. They know the limit is there, so they're not likely to go over. They're going to be cognizant of it. You don't need to count words. Be aware if something seems too long, but really the possible issues that we run into with word counts are either students not knowing what is included in the word count. For example, primary source or any sort of quotes are not counted toward the word count except in the paper where they are counted. And then the other thing that we see with word counts is when students need to cut back, they have trouble staying hyper-focused on supporting their thesis. They like to include things like fun facts, but when it comes to trimming the fat, you know, those are the things that need to go, and they need sort of pushing in that direction. Okay, so I'm gonna go back up to the top, and we've got size limit, and you can see the size limit for a physical board. I guess first I should mention there are 2 different options for submission this year. Students will be either making physical trifolds the way they would in a normal year, taking photos of them, putting those photos in a slideshow and putting it all into a PDF, or they can make a fully virtual exhibit. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. For the physical exhibits, you're going to have no way to tell the size from the photos. Don't worry about it. And for the virtual exhibits, you know, I saw the template that NHD made, and there was no way for me to tell if it was a 72-inch by 72-inch template. So don't worry about it this year. But some students, okay, so for virtual submissions, I've got what that looks like on the next slide. So this is the example that NHD sent to us. This was done in Google Draw on just one frame from Google Draw. Students might do 1 page of Microsoft Publisher or 1 slide of Google Slides. And the point is that it sort of mimics the look of a trifold board, and everything is just shrunken down so it fits the way it would on that trifold. So what I've been seeing is that some students heard that Google Slide was an option this year, and they made a slideshow, which is not what we wanted. It's not what NHG intended. So if any projects come to you that are fully virtual and in a slideshow form instead of like this, you might want to just gently push them in the correct direction. And I can make sure that you all have the link to this so that you can send it to the students as well, so that they know that this is what the virtual exhibit should look like. Okay, I think we're good for that. I know it's a lot to take in. It's going to be really different this year. And if you have any questions, if you get an exhibit in, and you're really not sure what to do with it, just let me know or let Grace know, and we'll try to figure out how to give that student the best advice we can. All right, so the next one to talk about is documentaries. Not too much has changed this year for documentaries. It's a 10-minute time limit, including the credits. Let's see. Something to know is that students will use different kinds of software to make the documentary. Some of it might be sophisticated, some of it not so much, and that's okay. Students have had to work with what they have, especially this year, including more informal methods like recording voiceover on a PowerPoint and turning that into a video. And that's totally fine. If students use free software, there might be a watermark on it. Again, just remember that cosmetic elements are less important than the historical quality. You're definitely welcome to give suggestions for how to improve them visually, but just be aware that students might not be able to make any big changes based on the software they're using. And then just another thing to bring up is what credits should look like on a documentary. There's really no standard, but students don't need to cite each source individually the way they do for websites or exhibits. It's really more who owns the sources. So, they can list Library of Congress, and if they've got 10 different images from Library of Congress, just listing it once will cover all those. And these are a couple examples of what end credits might look like. Performances. So this is another one that's going to look different this year. So this year, all students will have recorded their performances. So individuals will likely have had a family member record them with a phone, and they'll be submitting that video. If they're working in groups, this is where it gets a little bit different. We've asked students working in groups to record their performance over Zoom or Google Meet or something similar. And for either individual or group, they're going to be doing it all in one take. That's what we ask of them, to preserve that live quality as much as we can. So students using Zoom can use virtual backgrounds if they want, but they shouldn't edit anything in after the fact. Okay. Research papers have also stayed pretty straightforward this year. But there are a couple small changes. So one is that a process paper is now required for research papers. They were not in the past. And I'm not sure what prompted that change, but they are now required. And another thing that's been clarified is that student composed words in the footnotes or endnotes should be counted in the final word count. Again, this is not likely something that you will have to count out yourself unless you really suspect that the paper is too long. All right, let's see. Again, students can use either MLA or Chicago style, whatever they're more comfortable with. And remember that research papers can be creative. They don't have to be dry and academic. They can add in anecdotes if they like. They can find ways to spice it up. Exhibits. So here, again, not a whole lot has changed. There are just 3 rules that have either been added or clarified. One is multimedia clips, again, like the exhibit, except for websites, the total is 3 minutes. And that is the total of any video, audio, or any kind of clips that are used on there. It must be on NHD Web Central, so NHD's platform that they created that started last year. The process paper and bibliography should be embedded as PDFs in the website. And finally, it has always been a rule that students should not have external links on their websites, but now they've sort of taken it even further to say any hyperlinks that are in, sources or bibliographies should be removed, which is actually sort of time intensive, but that's how seriously they take it, just to keep the content of the student website stable. Just checking into the chat. Yeah, Chicago style. I think they prefer Chicago because that's what historians use, but they know that a lot of teachers use MLA, so that is fine as well. All right. Um, Evaluation criteria. So, and this, again, you can find all this in the judging rubrics, also known as evaluation forms. So I'm not going to go too much in detail on this, but again, just stressing that historical quality is the biggest consideration here. This is 80% of judges' consideration of these projects. So a lot of students stress about the appearance of their projects, but we should really hit home that the research is going to be the most important thing. Some new criteria under historical quality this year. Historical argument is one that is new but not surprising, because I think teachers have always taught that History Day projects should have a thesis. But now that's explicit, now it's in there. Multiple perspectives is another one that I believe is new. Just encouraging students to see things from different points of view, not just to use the version of history that they already know, but to dig a little bit deeper. And then finally, the new one that I think is most different and most interesting for people is student voice down there at the bottom. And this is just our way of saying that we want to see that students have made these connections on their own, that they've analyzed those primary sources on their own, and that they're putting everything in their own words. We want to see that they're not leaning too much on the words of other historians. Okay. So I want to go over some common areas of critique, just to give you an idea of the kinds of things you might see in projects, the kinds of things you might want to comment on. So I'll start with rules compliances, in the bubble on the right there. So this is sort of the easiest thing to comment on, the most objective thing to comment on. Does it follow the rules? Does it seem to adhere to the word count or time limit? Do they have the correct title page, the correct multimedia length? And then finally, image credits is really important. I'm hoping that by the time students get past the district level, they've got the proper image credits, but I often see at the school level, students missing those image credits in there for exhibits and websites. And it should just be, one line underneath the image with the title, the year, sorry about that, and who owns the rights. And same for documentaries, making sure they have those credits at the end. Next, we've got theme connection. So is it there? Is it present? Is it in the thesis? And is it present throughout the project? Thesis, is it there, first of all? Does it include enough detail for readers to understand the claim? And does it explain the topic's significance in history? And again, we really see that through the impacts. So does the thesis hit on the impacts of that historical event? I put here quotes because I tend to see a lot of students quoting secondary sources, and that's really something that we are trying to push students away from. So making sure that they're putting things into their own words, that they are the storytellers. And then for primary source quotes, are there more quotes than student composed text? So making sure that things are balanced, making sure that primary sources are there to use as evidence, that they're there to complement what students are saying themselves, the arguments that they're making, and making sure that there's balance between what the students have written and the evidence that they're using. Analysis. So do the students explain themselves how all the pieces of the story fit together? Do they explain how a primary source supports their argument? That's what we want to see. And bibliography, I've put this in the biggest bubble because I think it can tell you a lot about how the student did their research. So you can start out with the more surface things like, are the citations consistent? Do they properly categorize primary and secondary sources? Are the annotations complete? Do they tell you how they used a source or how they plan to use a source? And then you can move on from there to look at the quality of the sources that the students used. Are there secondary sources from reliable or good quality sites? Again, many students didn't get the chance to get into libraries this year. They were doing the vast majority of their research on the internet. So were they finding those credible sites? Are their images properly cited? And I mean by that, no Google Images, no Wikipedia, but who really owns the rights to it? And then finally, are there text-based primary sources that can help tell the story instead of just relying on images? Does the bibliography show a breadth and a depth of research? And then you as reviewers, the kinds of things that you can add constructively would be things like what other types of sources might help this student? Can you suggest any good websites for primary or secondary sources that can help them along? Other things to consider, things like organization and content. Does the student balance different parts of the story well or leave important aspects undeveloped? Does all the content support the thesis? Things like this. And then I just have that reminder at the bottom. Remember when you were a student, these kids, many of them are 11 to 13 years old. The rest of them are 14 to 17 years old. What feedback would you want to see when you were a student to help push you forward, but also to keep it a positive experience? And I have all of those questions written down and I can pass them along to you if you think it'll be useful to have those sample questions and critiques. But just to bring it back to these main considerations, the main things we want you to be looking at are the historical research and scholarship, argument and theme connection, looking that the project's organized and effective, and that there's a focus on analysis and research. Those are the things that are really going to make an effective project. All right. And then finally, your tasks as an electronic reviewer. Here's what you can expect. Look out for Maryland Humanities emails with your review assignments. So make sure those aren't going to spam. You're going to look over the projects and I'm going to try to get them all to you as links. So I'm going to ask students to put everything into Google Drive, make sure that it is viewable by everyone, and then just pass along those Google Drive links so you can view them so that there's nothing to download. And we'll see how that works out. And then you will write student feedback in either paragraph or bullet point format. And you will submit it through a Wufoo link that I will provide to you in the assignment email. It might be easiest for you if you type everything up in a Word doc first and then copy and paste it into the Wufoo form. But that is up to you. Let's see. And then just thinking about the timeline, we will accept student projects between March 1st and March 26th. But before March 1st, I believe there's only one county contest that's going to happen. So projects are going to roll in really slowly at first, and then it'll really pick up in the middle of the month. I think about half of our counties are having their contests on March 13th. So around that time, we're going to start getting more projects into review. I'll ask you to return feedback within 5 days, just so that the whole process can move smoothly. And so the last reviews will be due March 31st. And I think I got that wrong in the first email that I sent out to all of you. I said the whole assignment would be between March 1st and 26th, but I was thinking of the student point of view. So just let me know if you're not available that last week. I can always change things around, but yes, if you can, it would be very helpful. As always, let me know if your availability changes or if you'd like more or less projects per week. If you need to take a week off, just let me know. And if you need anything, if you have any questions at all, just let us know. You can email me or Grace down the bottom. There are just 4 of us working on History Day, so I've put all our emails here. But yeah, that's about it. So I'm going to stop recording here, but I'm going to stay on for any questions.